But however, the migration from education to workforce, especially from keeping the traditional sectors aside, maybe into STEM roles, the participation is pretty low and the migration is not very seamless, let's just say.
Women are not getting the environment that they should get in the STEM field. They often need to relocate and the transportation is not provided to them.
A huge chunk of women are working in the informal sector. So we do need to think of them, and their recognition also needs to be in place, because when they're recognized, they are also getting a sense of security.
It has shown in many of the studies that the productivity has increased significantly, the mothers who have the facility of childcare functions, and it has also reduced the number of absenteeism. So it's a win-win situation for both the mothers and for both the industry leaders.
There are many other sectors that we've discussed in this room, in fact, today, where we can really work on to make sure that the ecosystem is not working in silo, but rather together. Because I think collective impact is always more profound than, let's say, one-off interventions.
Hi everyone, welcome to LightCastle Live. I'm Ishrat from LightCastle, and today I have with me my bunch of colleagues, so I'm gonna go for the introduction.
Hello, I'm Tasnia.
Hello, I'm Ainan.
Hi, I'm Amira.
Hi, I'm Sadia.
And today is Women's Day, so our discussion is gonna be revolving around mostly on women, and from education to entrepreneurship, we are gonna create a full circle of discussion. So without any further ado, I think I'm gonna dive directly into the discussion. So like I mentioned, from education to entrepreneurship, my first question would be around education. And to Tasnia, since she has been working at the education landscape for, I think, roughly around 1.5 years with LightCastle, and you have been introduced to students across Bangladesh, multiple universities. So I think from our studies, some insights have emerged. Like we have noticed that a very decent amount of enrollment in the tertiary education for girls are pretty high. They are enrolling in education. But however, the migration from education to workforce, especially from keeping the traditional sectors aside, maybe into STEM roles, the participation is pretty low and the migration is not very seamless, let's just say. So since you have worked in this landscape for a very long time, what do you think the top challenges or the bottlenecks have emerged through your lens, and a bit into the opportunities as well, if what opportunities you have seen that can be worked on? So yeah, over to you.
Okay, Shad. So if I talk about the numbers, so 21% women actually graduate from STEM field, but only about 1% transition into a STEM-based working sector, right? And this is where my project STEM is working on to mitigate this gap. And the main challenges that we think from the project that I have seen is that female students actually want to, pursue a career in the education or teaching sector, even if it's in STEM, but they don't want to go for a conventional STEM job. Also, what they want to do is that they want to migrate to different countries, because in Bangladesh they don't think the work environment is safe enough. And so these are if I sum it up, like the main three challenges is that women are not getting the environment that they should get in the STEM field. They often need to relocate and the transportation is not provided to them. And lastly, what is another main thing that the students are lacking is that they do not have the industry-specific skills. For example, they are good at the studies, the STEM field studies, but they are lacking for public speaking skills or like CV writing skills. These are the key skills that they are lacking. So these are the challenges on this particular segment. And if I talk about one intervention that can actually be helpful here is that industry academia linkage. Industry should they should go with the academia and they should design syllabuses accordingly. Additionally, they should come to the career placement centers and provide career related guidance to the students directly. So yeah. that.
Interesting insights. So yeah, I think I totally agree with you, especially about when we're speaking of, you mentioned a very key point, which is enabling environment, right? Enabling environment is everywhere is needed, be it education, be it workplace, be it when you are rooting for a leadership role. Environment, I think, plays a very big role, and that's my keyword for, I think, migrating to the next portion of the discussion, which is we are going to discuss a bit into childcare systems, or how this thing contributes a lot to women who are currently in the workforce. From education, for say, if I connect your dot from your education, suppose I get good education, I got into a STEM workforce or maybe a business role, and I've graduated with good score, and now I'm willing to enter the workforce. People like me who are married and also in the workforce, the next step in our personal growth might get to start a family. But however, our study has revealed, our, I think, major development partners, global development partners have conducted studies across South Asia, Bangladesh, and it has emerged that I think a big number of women are exiting workforce, or once they have their childbirth phase, they are not coming back to work, or that environment is not enabled for them, right? Or there are a few systemic bottlenecks that are not being able to, for which I think the solution is not being facilitated to them. So I think since Anand, you have worked in the childcare system for quite a few while, you have discussed with industry experts, beneficiaries, development partners. So I just want to know a bit into, through your lens, I think, a bit into insights and what the beneficiaries think, what the development partners think are the core bottlenecks that are playing a part, for which we are not being able to facilitate this environment. So yeah, over to you.
Right. Thank you so much, Ishrat, for this right question at the right time to some extent. So if I start right away with the stat, around 73% of mothers from low-income households, they have to exit the job force or labor force after childbirth. So we understand that motherhood needs to be celebrated, but it also comes with a cost for these women. And that is where childcare comes in, because they are having to exit the workforce, because they are having to take care of the children. It's ideally the mother's responsibility. That's how, unfortunately, our society currently works. And this is where multiple interventions can be coming in. So first of all, the main requirement is childcare. I won't say daycare, because there are many individuals who are working during night, and nighttime care is also required. As Tasnia rightly mentioned, that transport is required. One major thing was because many women are having to work during the night for STEM grads or for other kinds of women in the labor force as well. So first thing first is childcare, and to my understanding, and I think based on the understanding that I've received from different stakeholders throughout the value chain of this particular sector. So yeah, we have seen that why childcare is needed. One thing is, of course, it needs to be public funded, but the government also have its limitations. So not all of it can be funded by the government, and it also needs to fall on the employers and the community. So that is where the existing employers, be it factory-based or be it a corporate office or even a small company, they need to take responsibility, even if they're unable to arrange a childcare center within their space. They can easily contribute to building community-based childcare centers where these mothers or these parents can bring in their child and keep them there. And we are also seeing this gradual growth where, childcare is it was only about taking care of a child, about their safety. Now it's the right time that we are thinking of our future generation, and we're diving a bit deeper into their early childhood development as well. So it's not only about safety or taking care of them, it also needs to be about quality childcare, quality care in total. And another segment that comes in when we're discussing childcare is childcare as an employer itself. So this particular sector, when we are talking about increasing more or having more centers in place, we also need to think of having that pipeline in place where more care workers are entering this workforce.
Yeah.
And for care workers, one particular or core area is their dignity, because equal wage, equal pay, these comes in, but when they're not respected, they're not valued by their own community, by their own families, because of the work that they're doing, they're contributing to build the nation to some extent, and that needs to be valued. So recognition needs to come from the society, from the communities, and it also needs to come from the government through different policy interventions. So that is one particular area, especially for childcare workers. But when we're talking again, taking a step back for women in general working in the labor force, I think again, there are a huge chunk of women are working in the informal sector. So we do need to think of them, and their recognition also needs to be in place, because when they're recognized, they are also getting a sense of security, and there are many security or formalization practices coming in place with that.
Yeah.
So precariousness is going away a bit when this recognition comes in. And that is also something that needs to be thought of, because that will also empower them. That will also boost them to join the workforce or join back the workforce. So I think I'll end my note right here. And over to you, Ishrat.
Thank you so much, Anand, for these insights. These are very comprehensive. And first of all, thank you for diving into the details, because I, as a working class woman, I think I wanted to know a lot about these things. I mean, you have to know when you're in the ecosystem, you have to know what's going on, what you are anticipating at the workplace, and what can come, and how the organizations exactly are playing a role, or how the, let's say, the policymakers or the government is playing a role to streamlining this process, especially when women are contributing so much to the economy, and so much, so even a lot more in some particular sectors, right? So I think you have mentioned a very few, some of the very key important parts, which is going to help me connect the dot from you to Sadia, and which is going to be a bit more into worker well-being, safety, a safety net, and everything about RMG sector, which happens to be one of the core economic pillars of Bangladesh. And in the RMG sector, women also have a very high representation, right? However, if we are speaking of, even when I've seen a lot of mothers, even after like childbirth, they are still in the RMG sector, they're still contributing. So even if I connect the dot in a sense, like suppose the childbirth or the childcare systems are streamlined. However, even if we still talk about the women who are at the workforce, it's mostly crowded with, first of all, blue collar. And then even if it's crowded with blue collar, similar problems are still there. Things that are in the white collar system are even more grossly available, or more grossly catered and unsolved in the RMG sector in terms of well-being. And the more we come across news, studies, it doesn't actually paint a very happy picture, right? So since you have worked in the ecosystem for streamlining the worker well-being of RMG sector for over, I think, 2.5 years for now on, I think both of us are working in this landscape. So I think I'd like to know a bit more from your lens as an industry insider, that what kind of studies have emerged, what kind of insights have emerged in terms of the challenges. Let's just say, what are the core challenges, why we are not being able to solve this crisis even after like having the huge participation of women at the RMG sector. So I think I'm not gonna dive in more and give the floor to you.
Thank you, Ishrat. I think that is a very powerful question. So before deep diving into the answer, I would like to divide it in the two perspectives, one from industry perspective, another from women workers perspective in the RMG sector. So if we look at the core functions of the RMG value chain, we know that there is sewing, knitting, cutting, and finishing. And these skills for the core functions are usually mostly owned by the women who come from rural areas, because they consider this as their essential household and domestic skills. And globally, employers also have associated this kind of skills with the women who come from rural or low marginalized household income, right? So that is something the industry has always associated these skills with the women. And if I come back to the women's perspective, that why are they joining this particular low income tied roles, that is because as you rightly mentioned, that these women are mostly the blue collar job holders. They used to work in the informal sector, but RMG sector has been the first gateway for them to enter the formal economy. So even if the industry has a lot of challenges, we have to accept that this industry has allowed them to enter the formal economy, where alternatively in the informal economy they never felt appreciated, respected, or even seen. However, in this formal economy, somewhat they felt a bit, I wouldn't say safe, but a bit recognized by the society. So that is why they prefer coming to this industry. Now, as you rightly mentioned, that there is a huge pay gap between the women workers and their male counterparts. As I mentioned it earlier, that they are actually associated with the, low income tasks. For example, they are mostly associated with sewing, knitting, or working as machine operators or helpers. On the other hand, if we look, the majority of the male counterparts are working as supervisors or technicians, which require higher income. So it's actually not about the job title only, it's also about the negotiating power. And historically, our women workers have had less access to union leadership. As a result, they have always often been tied with low-skilled tasks in the RMG sector. However, I will also point out that in the recent time, there has been a transformational change, but it is still at a very nascent stage. So I think I would like to conclude my answer from here.
First of all, Sadia, thank you so much for these insights. I think you have shown us quite the right picture working in the RMG landscape, and especially when the sector happens to be a core economic pillar of our country, we would want the workers to thrive as well. They are contributing more than they can think to our economy. So I think we would want, be it women, be it men, workers, I think we would want them to thrive. We would want them to have a good environment wherever they're working. So especially for women, because like you mentioned rightly, there are a few pertinent issues like the pay gap, like the well-being, the safety issues, and a lot more. So I think thank you for those insights. I'm definitely going to dive into the reflections a bit more when I come back to you. I'm going to steer away a bit from this job, employment conversations to a very unconventional part, right? A very unconventional segue of the conversation, which brings me to entrepreneurship. First of all, I mean, many women, I think, have resorted to entrepreneurship as a career choice as well. We have seen a good rise since we work in the startup ecosystem. I think we have seen a good rise in the last decade in terms of pursuing entrepreneurship. And like Amira has been a part of the startup ecosystem, I think we have also interviewed a lot of startup founders, females, women startup founders. Like I think Sadia Hawk, we have interviewed her in LightCastle Live, and we have gotten some such interesting insights about her thriving as a woman CEO in a very let's just say new or a very interesting industry, which is the travel industry. So we have came across such wonderful women from such different verticals of Bangladesh. But I think mostly the challenges we have seen are very uniform, right? Most of the challenges are very common, very uniform, and they don't seem to go away. Even if the industry is thriving, women are more participating in entrepreneurship, and we have seen it for the MSMEs or CMSMEs as well, right? A lot of women are on the go with their entrepreneurship ventures. So I think I would, what my question to you would be, since you have worked, I think for a very long time, I think for 4 to 5 years with the startup, 4 years with the startup entrepreneurs, what kind of challenges again have emerged from your insights, and a bit into the opportunity window as well? I mean, what do you see from, as a sector expert, what do you see can be some plausible opportunities we can grab on, and also as ecosystem enablers, how we can, catch those opportunities? So yeah, over to you.
Thank you. That is definitely a loaded question. I'll try my best to answer it. So, to talk about the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Bangladesh, I'll just touch on 2 points. So, one is we have startups, and the other hand, we have SMEs, right? So, both are equally important, but I think we hear about SMEs more, primarily because they've also been a driving force in our like nation's GDP. But I'll talk about them in parallel. So what we're seeing is even with the same case of with women entrepreneurs and also startup founders, we're seeing that when we talk about barriers, we assume it's probably going to be access to finance. But interestingly, that's not always the case. So when we talk about SMEs, we're seeing that a recent case study published by IFC, I think sometime around last year, they disclosed that women entrepreneurs, particularly like women SMEs or let's say semi-large enterprises, they tend to perform better than their male counterparts in terms of access to finance. Yeah, so they even get better loan terms, like better repayment terms, reduced interest rates, and even the tenor is also flexible based on their performance, right? And that's something very interesting because usually we're always sort of being told that access to finance is a very key barrier. I mean, it still is, and I think it's always going to be a barrier. But I think the industry's also changed, and the entrepreneurs have also been evolving with the pace that's been at the pace that our ecosystem's been progressing. So for that, I think what I found really interesting was that case study specifically highlighted with particular with Bragg Bank. I think they partnered with Bragg Bank for that study. How how Bragg Bank portfolio SME customers, particularly women entrepreneurs, fared better. And that's an interesting insight. And we don't really hear this at all. And their main barrier actually was not like when the women entrepreneurs were surveyed, the main barrier wasn't access to finance. I think it was around 1.6% of respondents admitted to having that as a barrier. But most of them cited issues such as electricity, access to support services, access to proper documentation, or even transitioning from being a small scale enterprise to being a formal business who can enter the formal financial system, right? So that's something I would say a very key challenge that's not talked about enough, because all these entrepreneurs, they don't have access to support services, because once you have the resources to build and scale your company and formalize, only then are you eligible for finance. And I think that's something that's not talked about enough. But again, on the other hand, when we're seeing these SMEs, these startups pass through the formal system, they're raising funds. We're seeing ShareTrip, Marco Polo, Prava Health, or Go. They're raising funds. So it's just the number is small, because from what we've been seeing actually, is that they get stuck in the transition stage. So from being small informal business to being an actual fully fledged operational business. I think that's where a key barrier that we've been witnessing. And so for us, it's as an ecosystem player, it's our job to advocate for causes that have measurable impact, right? And by measurable impact, I mean things that we see in real time happening with our own two eyes, and not just something that we're putting on paper and then reporting it back to our donors, right? So coming back to the second part of your question as to what are some of the opportunities or what are the solutions that we can sort of advocate for, my suggestion would be, let's say the main cause that we would want to support is pipeline development and visibility, and also making sure that the ecosystem is not working in silo, but rather working together, right? So if we start off with the most basic cause that could be out there is data. We don't have enough data on SMEs, male and men and women combined, right? So we don't even have data on, let's say, number of SMEs, including men and women, per division or per district. These are insights that can actually help players, like let's say banks, investors, NBFIs, to know exactly where their customer bases lie, right? So let's say if we were to design a program, just from the top of my head, it would be to have a program where we coordinate with the relevant authorities, the relevant government agencies, to build a national data registry or a data repository where we digitize all the information that these agencies are holding onto, and then and then sort of so let's say support them into making it more accessible to the wider public, right? And the beauty of these programs are that these programs can be sustained. So these programs tend to be more catalytic, that meaning that once the program ends, we can eventually, let's say, sustain it by having private sector players involved and perhaps adopting a business model that works in their favor, right? So let's say as LightCastle partners working with a partner to build this data repository for SMEs, let's say just within the Dhaka division. And then when we make it accessible to the public, after the program ends, we eventually have to hand it over to a private sector player because otherwise it won't be sustained. So once we sort of hand this over, we're seeing that perhaps then they can adopt, let's say, a commercial business model. Like it could be accessed through membership fees or like a subscription model where we sort of provide them information based on a certain amount, right? Yeah. And again, this is just from the top of my head. It's nothing concrete, but I think these are programs that have meaningful change because we know for a fact that data is always going to be useful, even more in this world. And when we step into an area where we don't have enough data and we bring in these kinds of solutions, people also remember them. And I feel like that is impact. That's something that can be measured. It's seen, felt, and heard. And yeah, I think that's something we should definitely look into more.
Thank you so much, Amira. I think excellent insights. And like you mentioned, the bullet was loaded, but I think you took the bullet really smartly, I would say. And I think we have gotten a few answers already to all the challenges that have emerged. First of all, the power of data. Why we work, why we churn out these insights, why we bring in all these insights together for mass consumption, why we are simplifying these complex data, because they actually solve something. They actually lead to a direction. They actually lead to a decision, informed decision, right? So I think those were some interesting insights, and particularly you have mentioned a few other good things like the access of women handling better, or I think women handling better finances, right? Something that have emerged from the insights. So I think that's a pretty interesting nexus as well, particularly because I think the whole term finance or managing finance often come as a very manly thing. I don't know. That's something I've like grown up with. It's a very man thing.
It's definitely a challenge. What we see is it's something we can just sort of paste it on a piece of paper and also get away with it without looking into it a bit more deeper. Yeah, I think that's also a problem that we face. That I think every single one in this room knows how difficult it is to work with the level of data that we get, right? Yeah. And I think when we're really looking into these barriers, a lot of people don't know how deep it can really go to. Yeah. And for us, like, we do a lot of field engagement, so we know what the reality is. Definitely, I feel like there are certain, let's say, placeholder words that a lot of people get away with by saying because it's an easier answer without having to answer, let's say, the realities at a more granular level.
Right. I think you have rightly mentioned about bringing out the true perception of the industry, or the true image. I think that's exactly why we are here to have the candid conversations about each of these industries, each of these unique verticals to their own. So I think now I'm gonna dive into opportunities and a bit into like reflections. I think some of the opportunities have already emerged from the discussion. I think I'm gonna discuss a bit into our solutions, things that we think or our work reflects from our work that can be a good solution that can be adopted by, let's just say, similar like-minded organizations like LightCastle, development partners, NGOs, any organization who's like looking to intervene in such sectors, looking to design a program, looking to design a solution for them. I think this conversation come in handy for them. So I'm gonna start with Sadia. Back to IMG sector, and you have mentioned quite a few challenges and also a bit of a reflection into, I think, what are the good things that have also happened. I mean, what IMG has also enabled for women workforce. So I think, in your perspective, what can be the retention strategies, or what can be some of the sustainable solutions for the industry? So yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Ishrat. So before going to the strategies, first thing I would say, we know that the women workers who have been in this sector come from a low income household, right? So the first factor that should have worked for them was the wage. But we know the legal minimum wage is around 12,500 taka, which is actually not a good standard of living for this woman, because we know the inflation is hovering around 8.5% to 9%, and it's actually a lot for them. So if I move into the retention factors, the factors that have actually worked for them, I think I would like to connect it with one of my projects that I have been working with, Bunon 2030, under the initiative of Oporajita. From there, we have seen firsthand that upskilling this woman have been life-changing, because upskilling them has been the foundation for their psychological and financial safety. And upskilling our women workers has enabled them to gain a more leadership roles. They are now climbing up their ladders, career ladder, and that has allowed them to gain the leadership independence, boosted their confidence, and also gave them a sense of financial independence as well. And it's not just upskilling. Besides, I will say, as my colleague Ainan Tajrian has mentioned about the childcare facilities, we know there are a lot of mothers at the RMG factories, and nowadays a lot of factories are establishing a lot of childcare facilities within the factory premises, and that has allowed them to work in the factory with a free mind. Now they know that their children are here; they can go and take care of their children in their break time. So it has shown in many of the studies that the productivity has increased significantly. The mothers who have the facility of childcare functions, and it has also reduced the number of absenteeism. So it's a win-win situation for both the mothers and for both the industry leaders. And the other factor that we often talk about, that is there any grievance mechanism in the factory? And the factories, again, a lot of studies have shown that the factories which have enabling grievance system have made the women workers feel more comfortable. It has actually increased their tenure in their factory, because they can go to that committee and give any kind of complaint, either it's discrimination against them, or any kind of sexual harassment, or any kind of grievance, and it is anonymous. So if I go into the factors, I can go on and on, but I think I would like to summarize this, that when all of these elements come as a package to our women workers, the workplace does not only become a source of income, it also becomes a source of empowerment for them. So yeah, I think this will be the major factors from my end.
I think a very thoughtful answer. You have created a full circle, how the industry and the employees or the workers can both benefit from these solutions. That's very needed. But I think you have mentioned in your answer quite a few keywords, which is going to help me steer away from you to Amira. So I think things that you mentioned, that financial independence, right, for say. And I think back in when we were discussing the financial management, or the independence of finance, independence in general in terms of work-wise, I think that is a very core essence of entrepreneurship. You happen to exercise a lot of freedom in your creativity, in your workflow, in your overall system, and how you take decisions. So I think that independence is a very core factor in entrepreneurship. And to bring in that essence, I'd be interested to know a bit into solutions as well. Anything, any sustainable solutions that you think that can be a good solution, first of all, for the ecosystem itself, and the enablers like LightCastle. It can be the investor firms, which can also contribute to the solution, and the SMEs and the startup themselves. I mean, the owners themselves. I mean, there can be some loose ends there as well. There's something they need to pick up, something they need to follow rigorously to come halfway. Let's just say. So yeah, not gonna dilute this anymore. So over to you.
Thank you. So I'll start with an example from based on LightCastle's experience and all some of the projects that I've been working on, and then I'll sort of talk about a potential solution. So when we talk about an example, so the Bina Gridhi program that's funded by the Swiss Embassy it's been running for the past 6 years, and we've supported a lot of these impact-oriented enterprises. And what we've seen, interestingly, is I think we funded this company back in 2022, and then based on programmatic activities, we just had another catch-up meeting at their office for another part of work. And it was really interesting because we were having a really candid conversation, and then they were saying that, oh, we're actually super grateful for the program because it opened a lot of doors for us, because it's the kind of support that we got, apart from the funding, it really helped us understand how the fundraising process works, how investors think, and what we can do to sort of build a value proposition for our company to these investors. And then the entrepreneur, I won't be naming names, but the entrepreneur sort of ended in saying that through this program, it gave them some sort of, let's say, credibility. It added a lot of credibility within their organization because they raised funds from a donor, and it helped them catalyze their operations, right? So in a way, it de-risked the investment for their future investors. And for us, we also got to see the impact happening in front of our own two eyes. So I think that was a really nice example, a real life example of our program and what we've achieved. So that's one. That's the example. In terms of, let's say, potential solutions we can work, I think the way the development industry is transitioning to, we will be needing private sector players to sustain all the initiatives that we've been championing for the past decade or so. And as I was talking back about this a bit earlier, taking up initiatives that actually work on building the infrastructure of the ecosystem matters more. Because once you have the foundation built, it's always easier to work on top of it and then roll out more initiatives. Even if, let's say, the Bino Gritty program is an example of how we build the foundation for, let's say, impact startups, right? So apart from the funding, they have to go through a rigorous process of, due diligence, a lot of, let's say, investment readiness training, building their own impact measurement and management systems. Because we've made them go through like a whole set of curriculum that's also very, let's say, practical and realistic, it helped them eventually secure more funding or also grow their operations without even raising external funding, just by their own, right? So I think these are some of the initiatives that we should definitely advocate more in the future. And I think, again, because with LightCastle, we're always working with data. I think there should definitely be an initiative where we actually do some work that contributes to building a credible database. I think we've done this case for startups. I think we've built a pretty good market intelligence platform, but I think there are many other sectors that we've discussed in this room, in fact, today, where we can really work on to make sure that the ecosystem's not working in silo, but rather together. Because I think collective impact is always more profound than, let's say, one-off interventions.
So great insights. First of all, I think I learned a lot of things from the solutions that you have mentioned, particularly working with Bino Gritty. I think I've been a partial part of the team, and looking at the insights, looking at the work they do, the intervention in itself, I think it's a very unique intervention and adds a lot of value to the startup ecosystem, to the SME ecosystem as well. Beyond intervention, I think there is a very key missing piece of the puzzle, which is the private and public partnership. I think the collaboration is also very important. For countries like Bangladesh, private sector plays a huge role. So speaking of private and public partnership, like the linkage, I'm going to come back to Tasnia. What she mentioned about in the opportunity window, she mentioned something pretty interesting about the linkage of industry-academia linkage, right? So I think I'd like to know a bit more about that, how SheSTEM is enabling that, what role SheSTEM is playing in terms of optimizing that partnership, that industry-academia linkage, and what kind of activities are being taken place. So, similar interventions, similar projects, similar project managers, if anyone is designing a solution for such and such problem, I think they can resort to a project like SheSTEM or the solutions you guys are bringing to the table. They could actually take a look at it, and they can actually design something similar from it. They can get inspired from it. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Ishrat. So basically, what happens in STEM is that it's a women-centric program, right? So we want to increase women participation in the STEM field through this intervention. And I think the key learning point for the industry expert from this intervention is that if they collaborate with in the academia more and how they can do it, right? So first of all, they can co-create a syllabus, which we are doing with our 10-minute school being one of our partner. We are co-creating online courses with academia, and that is how we are offering industry-specific skill opportunity to the students. So this is something that the industry can pick from us, and then they can come up with business tech competition. What we are opting for is rather than be making the business tech competition about academia or a student initiative, we are making it an industry initiative. For example, with Sheba, we collaborated, and Sheba designed their business tech competition in a way so that they can directly recruit through it. So if industries can offer that, like they can use this as a recruitment procedure, like BAT does it, Unilever does it with their battle of minds. So yeah, this can be opted as well in here. And lastly, I think what is in it for the industries. So the world is shifting, and Bangladesh soon will get graduate to LDC, right? So after that, we need foreign dollar investment, a lot of it. So because we are not gonna able to get any tariff tariff cut, right? So we need to opt for investment. So they will go for the diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. And to do that, they need more women in the pipeline.
Yeah.
So the industry has their interest here as well. For example, the ROI driven or the profit driven interest is also here. So that is why they need to come here and collaborate with academia so that they can start now to transit better on the future.
Right, right. Thank you, Tasnia. I think gave me a good picture of the whole linkage solution or linkage that system is up to. And I think what you mentioned, I think you have mentioned a very good point, which was for the industries. What's in it for the industries? I mean, the more we are growing as an economy, or the more industries are growing, the more companies are growing, I think the part inclusion is also a core vertical to the business, right? Is a just like other things, the finance audit or the environment, the kind of environment they're providing. Are they environment friendly? Are they green industry? Is that a green company? If they have good sustainable standards to their operations, I think inclusion also a very core pillar to the workforce as well. They need to have certain benchmark to inclusion. They need to have certain percentage of participation. It cannot be simply like 10 to 90, 20 to 80. They need to have certain reflection in the leadership as well. And speaking of that inclusion, I think I will connect very seamlessly with Ainan about her solutions to the childcare systems. I think if we get to streamline or if we get to solve that crisis of the whole childcare system, if we get to actually strengthen that factor, I think inclusion will come in play, right? Inclusion will be strengthened through that way in the industries in one way or another, and women will be more represented in the leadership role rather than just at the nascent stage or more crowded in the entry level roles. So yeah, I think I think some of the companies are already doing great. Like I'll just give a small anecdote about LightCastle. I think after this study, we also implemented a childcare policy. With the help of the childcare, your team, with the help of your team and the HR, we have actually developed a policy which could actually help our team members, the male and the women team members, to adopt this policy and get benefited by it. So yeah, I think such and such, I would like to know a bit more about such and such solutions from you, maybe a bit more into how companies can adopt, what kind of solutions companies can adopt, and also the development partners and the policymakers. So yeah, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Ishrat, for your question. I think I'll start right away with what Sadia mentioned during her response, that the factories, many of the factories, because it is enacted by the law, sometimes carrots do not work. Stick also needs to be there. So I would say here the carrot and stick both rule applied, and many factories have have their own childcare center. However, we have also noticed, I'm not saying that all of the factories, but for many factories, the case is also that they have around 4,000 plus women workers, but the childcare center is catering to not even more than 40 children. So that is a concern, right? We understand that not all the factories have the capability or capacity to expand this. So that is where we are talking about public funds, publicly managed or government managed childcare centers. We are also, that is why we are talking about community-based childcare centers. And here, when we are talking about even privately managed or community-based childcare centers, employers can play a role. Like what LightCastle did, LightCastle's policy mainly talks about, it gives out a specific allowance to the parents so for their childcare related expenses, mainly in connection to enrolling their child to a particular center. So that is one way of having having some level of support from the employer. Another kind of support is the employer paying directly to a childcare center, be it a community managed or a privately managed center, and empowering that center and or enabling those centers to have more capacity to have accommodate more children in those spaces. So that is one way where employers can invest a lot. And I would reiterate, it's not only for the employers to invest in, it's also for the development partners, the government, and for the workers themselves too, because this is their child, this is their responsibility. As well. Another area where investment needs to happen when we are talking about women being more empowered and women being escalated to leadership positions or higher positions is having returnship programs where they can reintegrate into the workforce after childbirth, after playing their motherhood role, or it's not after, it's a continuation or continuing role. But that is one area where investment can happen through, upskilling or reskilling the individuals who are joining back. I think BRAC has recently introduced this particular bridge returnship program, which is quite progressive of them. So that is another area. And when we are taking a bit of step back into, we are talking about women workers in general, when we are talking about childcare workers too, because they also have their rights and we need to think of that too.
Yeah.
And that is where we talk about, this is, I think, I'll echo what the Labor Reform Commission has mentioned, is childcare workers have their rights, and that needs to be recognized. So a formal recognition of care workers. Care work cannot go unpaid. It needs to be recognized. It needs to be reduced from the mothers. It needs to be redistributed to other parents and other care personnels, I would say. So that is another avenue where we can do better. And one final take that I would have, I think whenever we are talking about worker empowerment, one thing that comes into mind, I think globally, the pay gap is quite high between men and women. So that cannot be continued. It is non-negotiable, this particular part, that wages need to be equal, and positive reinforcement needs to be there. So to that extent, I think it's not only for women, it's also for men. There needs to be sectoral minimum wage set for different kinds of sector, so that the workers have a standing point to bargain, and they have that space to for collective bargaining. They can associate with other workers, and they can collectively bargain for their wages. So that is also another area where I find there can be a solution. One final thing that I would like to say is this is a bit reiterating what Amira mentioned about using data-backed practices. So using data-backed and gender-responsive policies for our workers. So first thing first, when we're talking about having a factory having accommodation for 40 children, but having workers more than 4,000, these numbers need to be in the paper, and the representation of these numbers need to be in the policy as well. So if the factory has 4,000 workers, there should be a mechanism in place where 4,000 out of 4,000, like, let me think, maybe we can consider 30% of them are mothers or parents or guardians to some extent. So at least for 30% of these individuals, some level of mechanism needs to be there to take care of their children. And I think in terms of gender responsive policies, organizations and the overall governance mechanism can take into different kinds of progressive practices like menstrual leaves or parental leaves, I would say, because the responsibility of childcare needs to be equally distributed, or to some extent equally distributed, on both parents. So I'm talking about both paternity leaves and maternity leaves and parental flexibility, so that at least for the first 6 months of parenthood, so that they can also adjust to this new type of lifestyle that they have been blessed with. So I think that's where we are at, that like whenever we are designing anything, we need to be more gender responsive. We need to be more talking with data in hand. And that is where our ultimate solution lies. Over to you, Ishwar.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna, and such comprehensive details to the industry itself and how the solution mechanism should look like in multiple verticals, the employers, the development partners, the government itself. And so I think at the end of the session, we are at the very end of the session, and some of the very common challenges and solutions were discussed. What I understood from this conversation, I'm a proper outsider, so that this gave me like perspectives to all these different unique verticals to its own. And I believe, I'm glad this conversation took place, because we could actually, I could never actually connect such unique propositions all together. So I'm glad this conversation took place, and we could actually connect the dot, a full circle of a girl to a woman to a leader. We could actually connect that journey, and these conversations will go on. There's no end to it. Each segment, I think it can go on and on. We can never stop, but we have to put an end to this. So I just want to say a few interesting avenues that were discussed throughout the conversation that needs to be adopted by the employers, by the development partners, or the private sector as well, which was data, using data for their own good, for their company's good, just not for the employees, just not for the women workers, male workers. Data is needed for an inclusive and a sustainable growth. And then was the partnership. The partnerships played, I think it was a common solution across the table, that partnerships needs to be done. Collaboration is key for at least for a country like Bangladesh. I mean, it's applicable for all, but a country like Bangladesh needs people to work in tandem rather than the silo. So yeah, I think these, and upskilling was also another factor which came in play for both childcare and both the armed sector as well. So yeah, I think the last one would be, I think the common key to the whole thing, the common thread to the whole thing was platform, giving the platform to women, not because of any gender norms, not because of they need to fill up the representation, they need to look good in the paper, not because of that, but being fair to the opportunities, to the platforms, and to the roles they cater, the roles they can actually lead. Being fair to those. So I think these are very much needed things. These were needed to say. And I'm just going to conclude saying Happy Women's Day to all the women out there, to all the girls out there who were listening to this conversation, who felt a bit empowered at least, and felt that their voices are being heard across the table from multiple sectors. So yeah, Happy Women's Day. Should we say it out loud? Like,
Yes.
Happy Women's Day!